There
Okay,
we go.
now it's
Okay.
recording.
Okay. Okay. Right. So, hi everybody. Um, this is our little chat that I've organised that was supposed to be a Facebook Live, which is now just a video where I'm going to have a chat with Rachel from Peak Dog Nutrition, and we've got a few questions. I've got a few questions lined up for her about dog nutrition, and more specifically to do with um, puppies as well. But first off, what I thought I'd do is, Rachel, not to kind of put you on the spot, is just if you just want to do a little, just tell us a little bit about what you do, that would be really useful.
Yeah, okay, so I am Rachel. I run Peak Dog Nutrition and Wellness. I'm based near New Mills, but I do my consultations online, so I can, see anyone anywhere in the world if necessary.
Yeah.
I'm qualified as a nutritionist, so it's a bit of a difficult one. There are a lot of unscrupulous qualifications out there that don't necessarily
Yeah.
mean that you've done that much work to get
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
be able to call yourself a canine nutritionist. But
Yeah.
I have done an off-qual regulated course, and I've just completed a mentorship with a brand new association of pet nutrition consultants, which is very exciting.
Wow.
So,
Oh, brilliant.
yeah, so hopefully that's going to start the ball rolling and actually getting the nutrition kind of industry a bit more regulated. So you'll be able to
Yeah.
actually know that people have done the work and they know what they're
Yeah.
talking about, basically. I know it's the
Yeah.
same in training and behavior as well.
Yeah, is it one of those things where you can kind of go online and pay £30 and then you get a certificate saying
Yeah,
you're a nutritionist, like you can do with being a
yeah.
dog trainer as well? And
I don't think
like,
you even need to do that. I think you can literally
yeah,
just pick up one day and say, I'm a dog nutritionist now.
yeah,
But
just
yeah, it's that
decide,
sort of
just
thing.
decide. But
Yeah,
yeah, so for pet owners, it's really hard to know, isn't it, whether they're getting someone that actually knows what they're talking about or not.
yeah, it
Um,
is.
and I often get people asking me for advice, and to be honest, up until I met you, usually what I would do is I would just recommend people get in touch with the vets because that's kind of the first port of call, and I can sort of share my experiences of what I've fed my pets and what's worked for them and what's not worked for them. um but you don't really know who else to go to, and so
Yeah.
the fact that somebody like yourself, that's your area of expertise, is going to be so useful to people. And you've got two dogs of your own as well, haven't you? Is that
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I've got a border terrier and a duck collar. And
Right.
yeah, they both have presented their own challenges over the years. Training, behavior, nutrition, all that. So yeah, I do have
Yeah.
my own dogs.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're the inspiration behind why I wanted to learn more about nutrition.
Yeah. That's
So yeah.
often the way, isn't it? That
Yeah,
these
definitely.
dogs of ours kind of get us into this industry.
Yep.
And then that's it. Um, so I work with kind of dogs of all ages, but I thought what we'd do is, rather than like doing a really, really broad thing that's going to go on for ages, I thought we'd sort of focus more on puppies because with it being like a new school term, we've got new puppy classes starting at the moment. So I had my first group of new puppies was last night, and then I've got two more groups starting on Sunday as well.
Yeah.
Um, and often people do ask me questions. So I've kind of just put together like common questions that people might ask me, but also things that I'm interested in as well.
Mhm.
So I've tried to limit it so it's not too many, so we're not going on for
Yeah,
ages.
some of the questions that you sent me, I could talk a lot more on, so
I
you'll
know,
have to
I know,
just
I know,
stop me. But yeah,
I know. Okay, I will, I will.
that
Um, so normally, so when we're kind of like picking a puppy, or when clients come to me and they're picking puppies, I'll always say to them to find out what the breeders are feeding the puppy, because there's such a wide range of different things. On the one hand, and I'm sure you'll have come across this, you come across breeders where they feed them like two Weetabix or something like that, two Weetabix and a boiled egg. Like I've had people
yeah.
say that that's what the breeders feed. And then equally, you'll have breeders where they feed, like a complete puppy food, like dry biscuits, and then more so raw as well.
Yeah.
Um, so what I normally say, and you'll have to tell me whether this is right or not, is I normally say to kind of stick with what the breeder has been feeding for the first few days, if not the first week or so, just to
Yeah.
settle them in.
Yeah.
And would you go with that sort of
Yeah,
thing?
I'd even go a little bit longer, maybe 2 weeks, just keep them on the
Okay,
same stuff that they've come on.
okay,
Because that time in a puppy's life is incredibly stressful.
Yeah.
You're removing them from everything that they know.
Yeah.
And that, the stress itself has an effect on the body. So you can try kind of swapping them onto different foods, but actually that stress will just cause them to have an upset tummy,
Yeah.
whatever you
Yeah.
feed them, even if you're putting them on the best food there is.
Yeah.
So the best thing is to let them settle, let their kind of nerves settle. If they seem
Mm-hmm.
a particularly nervous puppy, wait even
Yeah.
a bit longer. Um,
Okay, that's
and then
interesting.
it's a kind of really gradual transition as well then.
Mm.
So don't just, swap over a couple of days, do it over a week to 10
Yeah.
days very gradually.
Okay.
You're asking their gut to change basically, in how it
Okay.
digests. So you're asking quite a lot of the body. So you don't want to do that
Okay.
once they're already in a state of stress.
Yeah. So if you've got a breeder that's already feeding raw, even if you're not personally keen on feeding raw, you'd recommend to carry on feeding the raw just while
Yeah.
they settle in to start
Yeah,
off with.
definitely. Usually a breeder will send you home with some
Yeah.
food.
Yeah.
So if you can just say, look, I'm a bit worried. I would like to buy, 2 weeks worth off you.
Yeah. Yeah.
That would be my
Yeah.
way of doing it, definitely.
And even if it's like some really cheap, rubbishy food that you're like, God, I would never feed my dog that, you'd still
Yeah,
just stick with
yeah, I
that.
would keep them on it. You could sort of gingerly start adding other bits and pieces, I guess, but
Yeah.
not,
Yeah.
not in great quantities at that
No.
point. So yeah,
Okay.
as
Because it's
painful as it
quite
would
common
be.
anyway. Sorry, go on. Because it's quite common anyway, isn't it, for new puppies to have upset tummies anyway for like that first week or so, isn't
Yeah,
it? And I
and
suppose
it's
if you're
stress.
changing the food, you're not going to know, are you, whether it's because you've changed the food or whether it's just like a stress response.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
so
Yeah,
yeah, so it often will take their stomachs a little while to settle down anyway without that extra change.
definitely.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's really useful. Um, and then a lot of times people will bring puppies from breeders and they'll be feeding them sort of 3 or 4 meals a day. Is that what you would suggest as well, little and often?
Yeah, at the start, definitely. So I would say
Mhm.
up to about 4 months, 3 to 4 meals a day, definitely.
Okay.
And then you can start to wean down. So sort of 5 to 6 months go to 3 meals.
Yeah.
It's up to you whether you feed twice or once a day. There's a
Hmm.
lot of kind of research out there at the moment for the benefits of intermittent fasting. But you don't want to be
Okay.
doing that until the puppy is fully grown, really. So you
Right.
need to make sure they're sort of at their full grown before you go to one meal a day. Um,
Okay.
Personally, I feed twice a day.
Hmm.
I just like them to have something in their tummy kind of
Yeah.
at night, just so they're not sort of starving hungry. But
Yeah. Yeah.
it's entirely up to you. Yeah,
Hmm.
but little and often, just so you're not overwhelming the gut at first, because
Yeah.
the gut is still forming. Everything in the
Yeah.
gut is still forming. All the microbes and things that we want to be there are still sort of appearing in there. And if you put
Okay.
too much of one type of food in, you can cause an imbalance. So
Okay.
often.
Okay, so little and often is kind of the best way. And I
Yeah,
suppose, if your dog, like with you saying, whether you drop down to 1 meal a day or 2 meal a day, because I think I remember like from when I was younger, when we had pet dogs, it was just like once a day. It was just give them a bowl of
yeah,
food once a day, wasn't it? But then a lot of dogs, like mealtime is like one of the highlights of their day, isn't it? So
yeah,
why wouldn't
yeah,
you do it twice? If you can
yeah,
feed them in the
yeah.
morning and then in the evening, it's a
That's
nice
it.
thing for them to do.
I would be
Um,
hassled
and
too much if I didn't feed mine twice a day. So
Yeah. And also, nowadays as well, we're suggesting like, especially sort of trainers, and I imagine you do the same thing, is like foraging for food and using toys and things like that
yeah,
for
yeah,
meal times as well.
yeah,
So for
definitely.
some puppies, you might end up splitting their food allowance for the day between like 3, 4, or even 5 meals, because then
Yeah,
you're giving them regular activities through the day as well. And you
yeah.
don't want to really restrict that to just once a day when you're trying to keep a puppy busy, then do you
No,
either?
exactly. Yeah.
So going back to the whole kind of when breeders feed weird things, like, apologies if there are any breeders listening, like porridge and Weetabix and eggs and things like that. Where does that come from then? Is that just like a traditional old-fashioned type thing?
So eggs, I don't have an issue with eggs.
No,
Eggs is a really
yes,
good
you
thing.
like eggs, don't you?
Yeah. Oats and things like that. It is sort of going back to a sort of tradition. You can feed them, but it wouldn't be my choice of food for a
Yeah,
dinner.
not necessarily the
They're
best
not
thing.
designed to break down carbohydrates, dogs.
Hmm.
They're designed to
Hmm.
eat mostly fats and protein. That's how their
Right.
body works. So
Yeah.
if you're sort of pumping them full of carbohydrates, they're not going to get an awful lot out of that. And you tend to
Right.
end up having to pick up a lot from the other end.
Because there's just a lot more waste, isn't there? They're just
Yeah,
pooing
because
it out, aren't they?
they're not actually breaking it down properly and absorbing it. They are it's just going
Um,
straight through. So yeah, I personally that's not something that I would recommend. Scrambled
yeah,
eggs, yeah, great. Raw
scrambled
eggs,
eggs is a
great.
good one. Yeah.
Yeah. But obviously that's not a
So
complete
if the
diet
breeder
either.
says that, just kind of take it with a pinch of salt, and then kind of
Yeah,
go with,
that's
yeah,
not
something
complete
that,
in any way. Yeah.
yeah, something that's a bit more designed for dogs.
Yeah.
And I know that there is so one thing that sort of I've been aware of for a while through having my own dog is exactly what you said about sort of the carb side of thing about and a lot of the time a lot of foods are kind of they're bulked out, aren't they, with the carbs, because that's
Yeah.
like the cheaper ingredient, isn't it? Obviously it's cheaper than the meat
Yeah.
and stuff like that.
It's
So
partly that, and it's partly, especially the dry foods, they have to add a lot
mhm.
of carbohydrate to actually form the food. So without it, you can't form the
Interesting.
dough that is then baked
Right, yeah, so they
in
wouldn't
kibble.
be these little biscuits held
Yeah,
together. Okay.
yeah,
So I kind of know from like picking up my dog's poo, that's always a good indicator. And often when because we're walking different dogs as well, some of the dogs that we walk, if they're doing like, massive poos, or,
yeah,
they're a bit softer or something, then I'm thinking, oh, maybe maybe that's because they're having, too much
yeah,
carbs in their diet. They've got
yeah,
something with like a lot of grain in there. Um, and
yeah,
and
definitely.
now as well, you can get kibbles, can't you, that have got a lot less of the carbs in, can't you? There are kind of
You
some that aren't
you
quite
can
as
get
carb
some.
based.
You do have to be aware of them just changing the type of carb. So quite often,
Uh,
even a grain-free kibble will still be full
yeah,
of
that's it.
carbohydrate.
It's grain free, isn't it? That's what people look for. They'll look for grain free, won't they? Or
Yeah.
gluten free as well. Yeah.
Yeah, so there is still carbohydrate in those because they can't form
Uh,
them without it. So you tend to see it in the
right.
form of like lentils, legumes, peas,
Right.
potatoes, things like that,
Okay.
which again aren't ideal. So if you
Okay.
are feeding a dry food, you're
Mhm.
best looking for one that contains the highest amount of meat, basically fresh meat, not meat meal.
Okay.
Avoid meat meal.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
so some suggestions would be Eden, that's quite a good one.
Yeah,
And
I've used that one
Millie's
before.
Wolf Heart as well, that's another one.
Yeah.
But if you are feeding just just a dry kibble, my recommendation
Mhm.
would be to add some like fresh food toppers onto that.
Okay.
Just to bulk out
Okay.
the nutrition because they're not very nutritious, if that makes sense. That they
Okay.
don't take the same kind of quantities of nutrients from those types of foods as they do from fresh foods because the body's not
Okay.
designed to extract the nutrients from those types of foods. Um,
Right. I see. And obviously that, they must be processed a lot and treated a lot because they've got to have a long shelf life as well,
yeah,
haven't
they
they?
are, yeah.
But also they're very convenient for people, aren't they?
Yeah,
A
so
lot of people are put off by handling raw food or the health concerns over raw food. So, in
yeah.
terms of sort of the complete stuff, if people are opting for complete, if they go for something with the sort of the highest meat content, so a fresh meat rather. Did you say it
Yeah.
was meat meal
So
that you don't want?
avoid meat
Um,
meal, yeah, and avoid
mhm,
any sort of meal basically. Those are the sort of
okay,
really ultra processed ingredients that have been just kind of boiled into a powder. And actually
okay.
they have a really nasty inflammatory effect on the body
Oh,
if they're
really?
fed
Oh,
over
gosh.
a long
Okay.
period of time. So if you fed it like once in the dog's life, it's not going to have an effect. But
Yeah.
it's this mindset of, oh, I buy this one type of kibble and I feed that for the rest of the dog's life, which is common
Yeah.
because it's convenient. But that's where
Yeah, and you think
the
it
issues.
suits your dog, so you think, well, it's good for them, don't you?
Yeah, yeah. There's also with the health concerns as well. It's little known, but there are actually more health concerns with feeding kibble. There have been more incidences of people becoming ill from touching the kibble and then putting their hands in their mouths than there have
Oh,
with.
really?
So raw food for dogs goes through extremely stringent testing before it goes out for sale because you're going to feed that raw. So they can't have, nasty bugs going into that. So they go through it goes through more testing than meat for human consumption goes through because it's going to be fed raw.
Oh, wow, right, right.
So there are actually more
Okay,
incidences
that's
of kibble.
interesting. And I
Yeah.
suppose if you're
Sorry, I think there's a
I
delay.
suppose if you're handling raw, you're a bit more aware of it as well, aren't you? aren't you washing your hands and things like that? You,
Yes.
you you keep on top of it a bit more, don't you, as well?
Yeah. Another thing to be wary of
Okay,
as
so
well.
tell us about raw feeding. Sorry.
So I'll just one other thing to be wary about as well with the kibble. There's a tendency to
Yeah,
buy large bags of it because it's more cost effective to do that. But actually, as
yeah,
soon as you open a bag of kibble, the ingredients in there start to oxidize, so the air starts to affect them basically, and the fats within those foods,
right,
which so kibbles are sprayed with fats to make them taste more palatable to dogs. Those fats then start to oxidize,
right.
which causes them to go rancid. And those rancid fats are a
Um,
really nasty thing to put into your dog's body, sort of day to day. You don't want to keep
yeah,
doing that. So if you
yeah,
are buying
imagine.
foods, buy the smaller bags. If you're buying the dry foods, and keep them in the
Ah,
bag,
okay,
keep it airtight, keep it in a dark place, because that will help to reduce the
okay,
oxidization. Yeah.
okay. I'm not doing any of that now. So tell us about raw feeding though. So when I got when I got Pippi now, so she was actually being fed raw by the breeder, and it was the first time I'd really come across raw feeding. And I wasn't keen on doing it at all, but I thought, well, I'll do it for a bit while she settles in. And then she just seemed to do so well on it that I thought, well, I may as well stick with it.
Yeah.
Um, it is fiddly. And I have got a small freezer in the garage, which is just specifically for raw food. And I do think it is more expensive than feeding like a grain-based food. Um, so when she was sort of fully grown, what I then decided to do, right or wrong, I don't know, was do half and half. So she has one meal which is raw, and then she has one meal which is a complete kibble, which is like the best one that that I can find.
Mhm.
So I can kind of understand people being curious about raw but not knowing what to do, or equally, wanting to just stick with kibble. So what are the pros and cons between the two foods then, between going down the route of the raw and going down the route of the kibble?
Okay, so this is where I could probably talk for a long time. So you just stop me if I go on too much. So, pros for kibble. Most of the pros for kibble are actually for the human rather than the dog. So
I
it is a convenience food. 70 years ago it didn't exist, and dogs have been
Yeah,
around for 10,000 years, living alongside
yeah,
humans. And it's only
yeah.
in the past sort of 70 years that we started to see these sort of allergy type things appearing in dogs, um,
Ah,
with their
interesting.
guts, their anal glands, all that kind of thing, which is so common now, just wasn't really a thing back then. You have
Wow.
to think, why is that happening? What's going on there?
Yeah,
Um,
there's a bit of a coincidence, isn't it?
yeah, and unfortunately, every kibble, dry food, it is ultra processed because of the way it
Yeah,
has to be cooked to make it. So it goes through really high heat and high pressure to actually
yeah,
be formed. And during that process, the nutrients become fundamentally altered, especially the proteins. They become what we call
right.
denatured. So the actual structure of the proteins changes. You then get dogs reacting to these as if they were a foreign object coming into their body because they're not
Right.
recognizing it as a whole food because it isn't the same anymore. It has actually been fundamentally changed. The structure's been
Yeah,
changed. So this
yeah,
is where we sort of start to see these issues. Um, if you're feeding it sort of day in, day out, that's when the issues can arise, and they don't tend to arise immediately. It will be sort of
right.
2, 3 years in, maybe a bit longer. Some dogs
Okay.
sort of cope with it for longer than others. There's all sorts of things that kind of feed into this as well. I mean, I could carry on, but so that's the ultra process side of it. Let
Yeah.
me just refer to my notes because I have written out a big a big load of
Ah,
stuff on this. Um, um, yeah, so yeah, price, you can get much cheaper kibbles, but
mhm,
you've got to look at the ingredients, what you're actually getting
mhm,
when you're buying these cheaper kibbles. So
mhm.
it's kind of a weighing up over the long term. Do you want to feed your dog sort of better, nutritious food for a little bit more?
Yeah,
Do you want to feed them
yeah,
something cheaper, which may result in them having kind of veterinary issues later down the line? And
yeah.
it's
Which
more and
obviously
more
is going to
common.
cause expense then.
Exactly, yeah, yeah, definitely. it's convenient for going on holiday. I understand that. There are alternatives. So if you are feeding raw, you can feed freeze-dried or air-dried foods, which are they are more expensive, but if it's just for like a
Mhm.
week or so, it's not so much the end of the world. And you
Yeah,
can, if you're going on holiday in this country, somewhere with a freezer, you can take the food with you. It is possible.
yeah,
It's just
yeah,
more of a faff than the kibble.
yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm not against kibble, but if you are feeding it, I feel like you need to make sure there's variety, and make sure there
Yeah.
is a bit of fresh going in there as well. So 20% fresh food on top, just to make it,
So
if
would
nothing
it be
else.
cooked fresh or raw fresh?
It is entirely up to you. So I have no issue
Okay.
with lightly cooked fresh foods either. So if people don't want to feed raw, absolutely fine to feed the lightly cooked foods. So you can
And
buy mixed from the
what sort of fresh things would you be adding? Do you mean, are you talking like fruits and vegetables, that sort of thing?
Yeah, you can do that. So fruits and vegetables, I would say fruits you can feed, lots of dog like things like blueberries, just almost
Yeah,
like a treat. Um,
yeah.
Things like spinach, so you can steam spinach. I
Mhm.
would say with vegetables, they're better lightly cooked because again, dogs aren't supposed to break down carbohydrates. So make it slightly
Yes.
easier for them by cooking it. Um,
Yeah.
Eggs are another great thing to add. Oily
Hmm.
fish as well. So you can just buy
Hmm.
the tinned, make sure it's in the spring water rather than oil or brine.
Yeah.
But you can buy
Yeah.
tinned small oily fish, so things like herring,
Hmm.
mackerel, that kind of
Hmm.
thing. You can
Yeah.
buy big bags of sprats from most raw dog food shops.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
like treats basically. My dogs will do anything for those. You can chop
Yeah.
them up
Yeah.
and
And you can keep them
um,
in the freezer, can't you, as well?
yeah, yeah. So those are great as well. Just anything to just it's sort of to make it more interesting for them as well, because
Hmm.
if you had the choice of a varied diet or just the same brown biscuits in your bowl every day, you you would choose presumably you would choose the varied diet. I
Yeah,
know.
definitely. Yeah, definitely.
Um,
Definitely. Yeah, I'd get bored with the same thing every day.
yeah, exactly.
And,
So
and
um
would you add meat to it as well? Would you add like meat to kibble?
You can do, yes. So you can buy the raw dog food mixes, the minces,
Hmm.
or you can buy mince from the supermarket. You just need
Hmm.
to either cook it or you
Yeah.
need to freeze it for at least a month just to make sure
Okay.
there's nothing kind of no parasites or anything like that. Because obviously
Okay.
we cook our meat, so
Of
um,
course.
just make sure you're safe with it like that. But if
Right.
in
I
doubt,
see.
just buy dog raw meat and add that.
Yeah.
Um,
And just
yeah,
have a little bit of
just
that.
makes it a bit more interesting for them.
Yeah.
But yeah, so then raw food, there are a couple of ways to do it if you do want to do it.
Hmm.
You can either do it DIY, which is a
Hmm.
little bit more, you need to know what you're doing. So if you're wanting to do that, that might be the time to come to someone like me and ask to be
Yeah.
taught to make sure you're not going to miss any kind of vital nutrients out.
Yeah, of course. Not, yeah, getting that balance.
Yeah, there are kind of subtle things that you can miss that can then cause an issue further down the line. Or
Right.
you can buy the pre-made raw mixes. And
Mhm.
as there is an issue with these in that a lot of them will state that they're complete when they're not. So be aware of
Ah.
that.
Oh, okay.
Fortunately, pet food labeling, there's a lot of strange loopholes that people can you know, put that things are natural or they don't contain
Oh,
calcium when
really?
actually they do. So,
Right.
and one of these is this complete kind of argument as well. So, um,
Ah.
just because it says it's complete doesn't mean it necessarily is. So again, if you're confused at all, go to a nutritionist. They'd be able to
Yeah.
help you. There are some good brands out there that are as close to complete as you're going to get without adding extras.
Right.
Still,
Okay.
I would say they're never complete unless you're varying the protein that you're feeding.
Okay.
So each protein, each meat has different nutrients within it. Each offal has different
Yeah.
nutrients within it. So like venison will be different to pork and pork
Yeah.
will be different to beef. And you want to
Yeah.
feed sort of that whole spectrum so that they're getting
Yeah.
different levels of nutrients from all different meat sources, basically. So
Right.
even if
I
you're
see. So
feeding them,
it's no good thinking they like chicken. Let's just feed them chicken. It
yeah,
needs to be a variety.
yeah, definitely. It needs to be a variety. Yeah, because you can end
Mhm.
up with nutrient deficiencies just from the fact you're not feeding another type of meat.
Yeah, of
You're doing it long
course.
term. If it's for like
Yeah,
a month at a time or 2 months at a time, it's probably not going to cause a problem. It's when you're sort of doing,
yeah,
a year of just chicken.
yeah,
And
yeah,
if your dog has issues with intolerances or anything like that, and you're worried about feeding or trying different meats, that's when you need to go to a nutritionist as well. They can
hmm
help you to work out what's going to work for your dog and what's not.
yeah, yeah. Excellent. Okay, brilliant. Right, I think that's covered about three of my questions in one,
Sorry.
all in one go. No, it's great. No, it's fine. It's really good. Um, and in terms of treats, so there's one area where I kind of um I get in trouble with, because obviously we're trying to keep our dogs fit and healthy, aren't we? We don't
Yeah.
want them to become overweight. And um I watched a webinar recently which was really interesting about the sort of the health issues long term that can come with letting our dogs be overweight and
Mhm.
contributing to joint problems and things like that. But then on the other hand, when people are coming to training classes, I'm saying, right, we need to be feeding them loads of treats because they've got lots and lots of things to learn. And so from a training and behavior point of view, I will kind of use, whatever treats we can use in order to get that behavior right, or, to make sure that they're learning new things. Um, and so there'll be a real range of different treats that people are using. There'll be people will be going to the shops, they'll be buying packets of treats. Some people will bring food from home. I normally recommend for sort of high value treats, if we've got a dog that's really distracted or if we're really struggling with something, I'll recommend um, things like little bits of cheese or bits of chicken or little bits of sausage, because they're easy to kind of cut up into small bits.
Yeah.
And what I'll normally say is, especially with a smaller dog, if they're getting a lot of, treats, to sort of reduce the food, to allow for that, so that they're not
Mhm.
um, putting on lots of weight. So what would you suggest as good training treats?
So I guess similar to the food. So the fewer ingredients, the better.
Yeah,
If you look on the back of the packet and there are a load of ingredients that you don't recognize, that you wouldn't know if
yeah,
they're in your kitchen, you wouldn't recognize them in your kitchen cupboard, avoid
that'd
those.
be fine.
So the sort of
Yeah,
long chemical names. The
yeah,
best ones I've found have been things like the JR pet pates. Do you know the ones I
yes,
mean?
they're great. Yeah,
So
we sell
those
those
are
in class. Yes.
yeah, those are like 100% the meat that they say they are, which is
Yeah,
great for, especially if you're doing an elimination diet or something with a dog.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
it's brilliant, and it's soft, so it kind of has that high value um
yeah,
to it as well. Um,
yeah.
Also the sort of air dried meat treats as well. So if you don't want like a
Okay.
sloppy wet treat in your pocket,
Mhm.
you want something harder that's going to hold up and not disintegrate.
Yeah,
Yeah, again, I think JR do them as well, the hard
I think
treat.
I do. Yeah, yeah,
There are lots of places online that do these treats. You just have to check that they are 100% the meat that they say they are. They've not got any kind of weird additives.
right.
A
I
few
see.
additives is fine as long as they're recognizable, if that makes
Yeah, yeah,
sense.
yeah,
And say
yeah.
you're
And you don't
trying
want.
to not feed your dog grain in their food, and then
Yeah,
actually the treats that you're feeding have got flour in or something. So just being
yeah.
aware of what other ingredients there
It's
are.
in there.
Um,
Yeah, of
yeah,
course, of
and you
course.
can make your own as well. So
Yeah,
dehydrating liver and things like that, or
yeah.
dehydrating, thin pieces of meat.
Mhm.
That's another good way of doing it. Um,
Okay, okay. What about chicken and things like that? Is that all right?
Yeah, yes, as long as your dog is okay with chicken. A lot of dogs do have
Mhm.
allergies or intolerances to chicken. So
Right.
yeah, as long as you're happy that your dog is coping with chicken, that's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, if they work for it, then that's great.
And can I use the odd bit of cheese still, please?
Oh yeah, of course, yeah. Like the odd bit's fine. It's
The odd
like
bit's okay.
if your dog's got I don't know, like pancreatitis or something like that, and you don't want to be feeding them something
Yeah.
really fatty, then I would say no, don't do that.
No.
But yeah, if it's just, for a quick training session, and I would cut
Yes.
it up as small as you can as well. They don't need a lot, do they?
No, not at all, not at all. And with small dogs and puppies, I'll tell owners to grate it, and then it's like a little piece of the grating of the cheese as well,
Yeah,
because it's
yeah,
still very tasty for them, isn't it?
yeah. Just something
Um,
tiny, like a morsel that they
yeah,
can have. Yeah, as long as it's not
yeah.
sort of you're not making them unwell through it, because if you fed them
No,
a lot of cheese, it would probably
yeah,
go through them. You
yeah,
would know they weren't
same
very
as
well
with us,
from it.
isn't it? If we had too much cheese, we'd end up being poorly as well, wouldn't we?
Exactly, yeah.
Brilliant. Oh, well, that's been really, really interesting. Was there anything else that you thought would be useful to cover? Because you've covered everything that I wanted to talk about.
I think just making people aware that diet and behavior are really closely linked.
Yeah, that's a
And
really good one, actually. Yeah,
there's more and more kind of being found out about this, and it's all to do
yeah,
with the gut and how the gut reacts to different foods, and
yeah,
um, making sure that the microbiome in the gut, which is the bacteria and everything that live in
mhm,
there, is
yeah,
in the right balance so that they're digesting their food properly. Um,
yeah,
Ways to know that that's not happening is if you've got an itchy dog, if you've got a dog
hmm,
that's got anal gland issues, if they've constantly
yeah,
got runny or soft stools,
yeah.
if they've skin or ear infections that keep coming back. Those are all
Okay,
signs that your dog's gut is not in the right balance.
right.
And
I see.
that can then go on to affect behavior because they're not feeling their best. But
Yeah,
it
of
can
course.
affect behavior in many other ways as well, but I won't go into that. We
Yeah.
can maybe
I
do another
suppose
one.
it's like us and it's like children, isn't it, as well? If you're feeding, there was always a thing, wasn't there, about like numbers for kids and
Yeah,
things like that, and that causing problems. So it's just the equivalent of that, isn't it? For dogs,
it is.
it's the
Yeah.
same thing.
And the
So it's
gut's
always worth looking
responsible.
at diet as well, isn't it? If there are any like training or behavior issues, it's another one
Yeah,
to check.
definitely worth having a look. The gut's responsible for most of their immune system, 70% of their immune system, and it's also responsible for a huge number of the kind of happy, feel-good chemicals that go to the brain. So
Well,
things like
right,
serotonin, GABA, dopamine, all that
yeah,
kind of stuff, they originate in the gut. They're made by the
right,
bacteria or released by the bacteria in the gut. And if those bacteria aren't
right,
happy, those aren't being released in the right kind of levels, and you
yeah.
can end up with all sorts of things going wrong.
Ah, okay. Wow. God, there's lots to it, isn't there?
There
There's
is,
lots to it.
yeah.
Still lots to learn. We might have to do another one of these calls then.
Yeah.
Another
Happy
time to
to.
catch up on everything. Oh, well, that's been really helpful. That's been really interesting. So what I'll do is I can share this recording now that we've got it.
Yeah.
Um, and then you can share it as well for people that might want to find out. And you've got a Facebook page if anyone wants to find out more about what you
Yeah.
do.
Facebook and Instagram. My
Okay.
handle is at Peak Dog Nutrition on both. And I've got a website as well if people want to have a look and see what I do, basically.
Okay, so if they just search peak dog nutrition, then it should
Yeah,
come up.
should come up. Yeah.
Excellent. Brilliant. Right, that's been really great. Thank you so
Thank you.
much for that, Rachel. All
Thank you
right,
for having
take
me.
care.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye bye.